So you're thinking about moving to San Diego County, but first you're not really sure, maybe San Diego, maybe Escondido. Where do you go? Well, today on this video, we're gonna be breaking it all down. The cost of living, the transportation, the utilities, the food, and truly what it actually costs. So if you wanna know the difference between San Diego and Escondido on that cost of living, you definitely need to stay tuned and keep watching. What's up, amazing people? I'm Liz LaFour, and I'm with the MortgageLiz team located out of San Diego, California. And on this channel, all we talk about is what it's like to eat, sleep, live, and play here in San Diego, California, and all about the best home loans here in San Diego that will work for you and your family. And if this is something that interests you, you definitely need to click that subscribe button and that little bell so you're reminded every single time we release a new video, because we do that every single week. And honestly, we have clients every single week and every single day calling us, telling us that they are so interested about moving to San Diego and what it's going to be like. What is their monthly payment? And with that, we love the phone calls. So if you're thinking about making that move, you definitely need to give us a call, send us a text, or just send us an email. And make sure that you reach out to us, whatever way is best for you, because we would love the opportunity to work with you and for you on your new home loan and find you that best spot in San Diego that is gonna fit for you and your family. So now on to the basics and the breakdown of San Diego versus Escondido. Let's get after it. Okay, so technically speaking, San Diego and Escondido are in San Diego County and they're in California. So we already know that the cost of living is going to be high, okay? So we're already aware of that because technically we got the sunshine tax here in San Diego and in California. But there's a reason why many people move to San Diego, like the sunshine, the beaches, the beautiful, beautiful weather. I mean, like, we may not have seasons here in San Diego, but it is definitely an all of the time, all the year round best place to live, whether it's Escondido or San Diego. And so let's get after the breakdowns of all the costs of living in between San Diego and Escondido. And first on our list is home prices. So home prices, depending from San Diego and Escondido, because remember that's what we're comparing today. San Diego is about sales price about $645,000. And in comparison to Escondido, you're going to be able to find that home at about $527,900 in comparing the two different cities. Keep in mind that the city of San Diego keeps about 1.5 million people in San Diego, whereas in Escondido, we have about 151,000 people just in Escondido. So of course, our cost of living in general, you will find is less expensive and a lot less cost when it comes to Escondido. So in Escondido, technically speaking, we're gonna be able to find more for your dollar when it comes to a house based off that 527 versus the 645 in San Diego. So those statistics that we were just talking about, the 645 and the 527, were based off of bestplaces.net. However, some of my most recent research actually even shows that based off of the new pandemic, COVID, and everything that's happened in this last year, home prices are definitely gone up over 8%. And because they've gone up over 8%, you will find that it is pretty competitive to buy a home here in San Diego, meaning that there's not as many sellers that are trying to sell the home, whereas there are so many buyers that are trying to buy. So therefore, in this market, that I would not per se say that it's just a seller's market, because I have had a lot of clients buying a home, being able to buy an amazing price for that home. However, the home prices again are up about 8%. So in comparison to some time, you will end up finding those values north of the 600, no longer right at that 645. Same thing as Escondido, you're gonna find the home prices in the north of the 500,000, not so much lower at the 527. You're going to end up finding the homes under the 5 or about the 527, maybe needing a little bit more work, or maybe not as big of a yard, or maybe doesn't have a cul-de-sac, things like that. But you're gonna possibly end up finding more to that 500 range, where you end up finding maybe a bigger yard, maybe a better area, maybe a better school district. It truly depends on what you're specifically looking for, what your wants and your needs are, but more than anything, truly comparing those two home prices from that 645 to the 527, plus that 8% increase that's happening through this total pandemic year, and also the additional future increases that are going to be happening for the next years to come. Because if you are an economist or you have read anything about anything that's happening right now, you will notice that the home prices are not expected to drop. They're actually expected to continue rising and stay steady as the way that we're currently at. So if you're thinking about buying, it's still a great idea to be able to buy even with this environment where you have not as much sellers, but you do have a whole bunch of buyers. But you just got to be ready for that competitive spirit, because there is definitely a lot of buyers that are buying right now. The home prices literally have offers on them, and there is seriously anywhere between 6 to 15 offers on a property. So you definitely need to have the amazing real estate agent in your back corner that is totally knows the information, knows the market, knows the area, and knows how to negotiate in your behalf. So depending on where you want to live, whether it's San Diego or Escondido, the cost of living in general is going to be higher. With that being said, let's say you're not ready to be able to buy a home right now. You want to be able to rent for a little while. Well, renting in both situations, whether it is San Diego or Escondido, makes up about 48% of the population, meaning that almost half of the people that live in San Diego and Escondido are actually renting. It doesn't mean that it's technically more affordable. Depending on whether you need a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom, this can get really expensive. But again, we go back to that cost of living to find out truly how much rent is going to cost when it comes to San Diego or Escondido. So when talking about the renting, we're talking about in San Diego, rent for a 3-bedroom can be about $3,019. However, when you look at a 4-bedroom, because maybe you need that extra space, maybe your 2 daughters need that extra space, renting for a 4-bedroom is going to be about $37.01 when it comes to San Diego. Where when you look at Escondido, renting is actually a lot more affordable. So let's compare that to Escondido. Escondido, you will find for a 3-bedroom, you're going to end up paying about $2,458. Whereas a 4-bedroom, you're going to end up spending about $3,018. So you'll notice that for the city of San Diego, what you can pay for on a 3-bedroom, technically speaking, you can afford in Escondido for a 4-bedroom. So on this detail, you will find that the cost of living when it comes to homes and being able to live for that house, that's going to be in Escondido. So if you're thinking about moving to San Diego, the next thing that you need to be thinking about is going to be the utilities. And so here in San Diego, the utilities are pretty basic when the way that they're broken down. So when it comes to the gas and the electric, you're going to be connected to San Diego Gas and Electric, so SDG&E. They are going to be the company that takes care of your gas and your electric, and you're going to get one bill or 2 different invoices, but on one bill. Okay, and then you got your water and your garbage, which includes those extra trash cans. So that's going to come from the city. So let's put this in perspective. You're going to have your gas and electric, which depending on how much you actually use in gas and electric, this could be not that big a deal. I want you to know though, this can also be a big deal though, because depending on how much you are at home or how much gas you actually use or how much do you actually turn on that heater or the AC, this can get really costly. So right now, I would say that gas and electric will be about $200 to $250. On the flip side, if you compare it to my mom, for example, my mom doesn't have AC, does not have a heater for her pool, and does not have solar. So for her, we're talking like less than $100, $100 to $150 when it comes to gas, electric, water, and garbage. So it doesn't end up being that expensive depending on your current situation. However, that's not the same situation when it comes to all scenarios. So prior to us getting actually solar and building our pool, there was what we used to have on our gas and electric bill. It used to be really expensive. And I'm talking like $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 because at one point it would get really, really hot. And so we would run the AC. So when it comes to SDG&E, they actually do this kind of like this EquaPay thing where they review your bills for the last 6 months and then they balance them all out. So that way you have the same bill for the entire 6 months. So before we ended up getting solar and the pool and then like the upgraded AC, so we actually had like good AC that was based off of the current energy. The bills for SDG&E were pretty expensive, and they were talking like EquaPay through those 6 months was going to be about $300. So yes, that is kind of expensive. However, then we got solar, and for us, solar made sense. And so solar doesn't always make sense though. Let me be very clear about that. Yes, here in San Diego, solar is actually really common, and you will find about a big percentage of people do actually carry solar either on their homes or are having solar cars that are being able to be driven by just energy, vice versa by gas. So that is actually really common here in San Diego and in California. But with that being said, you talk about the gas and electric, so you end up having solar, and the solar ends up dropping down your bill. However, like I said before, that's not always the case, because I have had friends where they don't overbuild when it comes to the solar. And so the problem ends up being that they end up still having that extra bill. So let's say, for example, they could have needed 15 panels. So for the 15 panels based on their current bill, that's the way that they built it out. But in reality, we all know that once we get solar, we turn everything on. We no longer are trying to save energy and save the AC or save the heater. No, no, no. We turn it all on all throughout the day because we need it. Hey, we got solar. The problem with that is you didn't overbuild your actual system. So you end up getting a bill at the end of the month because you didn't overbuild. And so when you do end up getting solar, when you do move to San Diego, that's something that you want to definitely consider, because maybe you need it, or maybe you're like my mom and you technically don't, because in her case, her bill is so tiny that it's not common for her to actually need it. Don't get me wrong, she has been tried to be sold solar, and in reviewing the bills, they don't make sense. So when you're moving to San Diego, you just got to make sure that do you own the solar, do you not own the solar, because those are two totally different things. Now, let's talk about the water and the garbage. So water and garbage is pretty standard. So it depends on one, how much water you use, and two, if you had a pool where you're auto filling it, then that can end up also getting kind of expensive. And then sadly, we get charged extra for our trash cans. So trash cans and then the extra water can end up being kind of costly. When it comes to the water and then the garbage bill, you're going to be looking at about $120 to $170. So of course, during like the June, July, August kind of time frame, technically speaking, there is a lot more evaporation. And so when it comes to that, we got to autofill our pool just a little bit more often. And so then our bills are just a little bit more expensive. And of course, if you do end up getting extra trash cans, then your bill definitely ends up being a little bit more expensive. So it's just things to be able to watch out, that regardless of whether it's San Diego or Escondido, they are things that you're going to need to be aware of. However, when it comes to Escondido, because of the weather that is hotter in Escondido than in general San Diego, you're going to most likely need that AC. And then of course, the pool in general, you could need in both different areas, because of course we are very close to the beaches. But the AC, the reason why I say that is because the weather in Escondido is hotter than the outside San Diego or San Marcos or Carlsbad or Vista or anything else. It is hotter in Escondido by about 10 degrees, or maybe you can even say 5 to 10. But we are typically in tank tops and in shorts the majority of the year when it comes to San Diego. And then you go to Carlsbad, where it's typically, let's say 60 to 50 degrees sometimes, or 65 degrees. And at that point, us that live in Escondido, we need sweaters. However, you go to San Diego and it's just typical. You got the 70, 75 degrees. So it's just you gotta know the differences between the cost of living of the utilities, and then kind of like the weather that comes along with it that we were talking about earlier, because the weather will come into play when it comes to that utilities that you are actually paying for on a monthly basis. Okay, so now on to the next thing that we're going to compare today, and that's going to be transportation. So transportation, technically speaking, here in San Diego and in Escondido, or just in the county of San Diego, we drive. I mean, to go to the park that's around the block, we drive. It's just because there are so many of us in, like I said earlier, with San Diego, you're talking about over 3 million people for the county. And then just in San Diego, you're talking about 1.5 million. And then we have Escondido, which is over 150,000. you need a car. And so 80% of us actually have cars and are constantly driving from one location to the other. I mean, from here to the softball fields is going to be at least 15 minutes. From here to my daughter's school is going to be 15 minutes because we do not go to the school that's right next to us. If you're going to go to the grocery store, you're going to hop in your car and you're going to go down the street to the grocery store. You're not walking to the grocery store, but you will use Instacart. So that's another option too if you don't want to drive so much. But when it comes to just transportation in general, when it comes to Escondido or San Diego, you're going to end up needing a car. So let's compare gas prices. So gas prices in Escondido and San Diego are a little bit different, not too different though, but they're almost identical. So the average gas prices when comparing the two, you got Escondido, which is about $3.59 for the average gallon of gas. And then you got San Diego, which is going to be closer to about $4.09. So like I said, it's not a dramatic difference. Yes, it is still a difference. And then technically speaking, depending on where you're in the city of Escondido, your gas could technically be more expensive. On the flip side, same thing with San Diego. So depending on where you are in the city, closer to the freeway, you're going to end up spending a little bit more money for the gallon of gas that you're trying to get. But then we compare this to the national average, which is $2.89 per gallon. And then we start looking at our own gas. And yes, that is definitely a lot more expensive than technically the national average. When you're comparing San Diego at $4.09 to comparison to Escondido at $3.59, I mean, 50 cents, depending on the cost of living, is not that big a deal, which one you end up wanting to go to. Just make sure that depending on your transportation, depending on how close your job is going to be, will depend on how much gas money you have to be able to budget on a monthly basis. Because you will find that a lot of people do commute to their employment anywhere between 20 to 40 minutes. And a lot of people that don't live here in San Diego or in Escondido will be commuting from Temecula, Murrieta, Menifee, from up there, and then takes longer to come down here in Escondido and San Diego. So it's just a couple of things to take into mind as you're thinking about the transportation. Even though, yes, we're talking about San Diego and Escondido, we also have traffic that comes from other counties to be able to work here, because technically the cost of living in those cities is less expensive than it is in Escondido and San Diego. So you do have to account for a lot of that traffic, a lot of the gas, and then just the time from one spot to the other. So whether it's your job that's going to take you longer to get to your home, or maybe it's the home that's going to take you longer to get to your job, because depending on what time you leave may depend on how much time you got to account for getting to that destination. Specifically when you look at the 15 freeway or the connector from the 15 to the 78, because that little area between that mile can kill you. You could be hanging out for a good 30 to 45 minutes just to go that 1 mile if you are hopping on the freeway right at 4:30. So I mean, like, just depending on those factors, it is really important that you're aware of the transportation and how much it's truly gonna, 1, take you, 2, cost you, and 3, how much the gallon of gas and where the best spots are to be able to get gas. So if we're talking about the total gallon of gas, which is about, like I said, $4.09 or $3.59, how much does it cost to be able to fill up my tank? Well, for me, I have a GMC Yukon. I'm a softball coach, and hey, I need the extra room. So for me, when it comes to the whole 25, I think it's like 27 gallon tank for my truck or my GMC, for that, it's gonna be about 70 to 85 bucks. However, when gas gets more expensive, when we're talking over the $3.59, like closer to like that $4 range, we're talking like my whole 25, 27 gallon tank for my GMC is gonna run almost 100 bucks. So I mean, so it's really important that you kind of budget that out and make sure that when you do take out cash or you're swiping that card, that you account for that money that it's going to take you, and then also account for how long you get to have this filled up tank before you got to refill it back up, because it can definitely cost you a bit of money to be able to travel from one spot to the other. So enough about transportation. Let's move on to the next stuff, which may be just a little bit more interesting. And of course it's the cost of food. So the cost of food in general, we love to go out to eat. So it's really important to be able to know how much it's going to cost when it comes to a restaurant to be able to go out to eat. When it comes to San Diego and in Escondido, there are some amazing restaurants. And so depending on whether you're doing a sit down or you're doing a drive-through, or maybe you're just picking it up and going, and then that way you don't have to tip. When it comes to those details, you're gonna find that the average kind of plate and meal is gonna be right about 12 to 16 bucks. So I would say right about that $15 range. So when it comes to $15, then when you actually end up sitting down, it's gonna end up being a little bit more expensive. So 15 bucks is great when it comes to just the concept of just the $15. But for me and my family, I've got myself, I've got my husband, I've got my daughter, my other daughter, so we got 4 people. So realistically, we are not walking out of there with a $15 bill. So when you start looking at a family perspective, when it comes to the cost of food, the husband's got to eat, the wife's got to eat, and then my 2 little girls got to eat. You're realistically going to be walking out of there about $80, because then you still got the appetizer, and then you got the dessert, and let's not forget, hey, sometimes you got to have a drink because you're needing that for the rest of the day. Okay, so and then let's not forget about the strawberry lemonades, because my girls got to have strawberry lemonades, and those are typically like $2 or $3 just for their strawberry lemonade. So stuff like that is really something that you want to be aware of. When you go to have the cost of food, it's not just the $15. There are some places that are going to be less expensive. There are some places that are going to be more expensive. When it comes to like Escondido, you could go to Ventanas and it's going to be a lot more expensive than $90 or $80. When it comes to, let's say, TJ Tacos, which is also located in Escondido, you're going to be finding that even though it's a Mexican spot, and even though you end up finding out that, yeah, it's a drive-through and you're just getting tacos, most likely you're not going to just spend $20. Most likely you're going to order your tacos, you're going to order your adobada tacos, you're going to order all like your nachos, and most likely you're going to be out of there with about $60. So stuff like that can get really costly. So all I say is that you want to make sure that 1, you budget, 2, you make sure that you don't overspend just on food. I've ran into situations when I'm talking to clients and they're trying to figure out, hey, where did my money go? Why don't I have my down payment? Well, we figure out after we do an analysis of their bank statement that they end up spending a lot of their money on going out to eat, or going to Costco, or going to the grocery store on several occasions. So just make sure that you budget those places out, mainly because yes, we have some amazing restaurants, but we also have a whole bunch of fresh food and fresh grown like fruits and vegetables here in Escondido and in San Diego. And so with that, if you go to the grocery store all the time, that can get really expensive too. So before we ended up going on a budget, my husband used to go to the grocery store literally like 3 or 4 times a week. And just because he wanted to make this new meal, this new idea that he had, he's the chef, not me. I don't like to cook. So he gets a new idea and then here he is off to the grocery store. So that's a new bill. However, what if you did it on a weekly budget? So we decided to, hey, we're gonna go to the grocery store 1 time a week. And with that 1 time, we had our $100 budget. Well, the $100 came to $150. So you wanna kind of just proportion that out when it comes to San Diego or Escondido, depending on how much you're actually going to eat, spend, and like consume. So just think about that as you're going throughout the cost of living and then the different places that you're going to think about spending money on when it comes to your food. And our favorite topic, taxes. So look, taxes in general when it comes to San Diego and in California and Escondido in general is high, okay? So when we look at the tax comparison for the state tax, you're gonna be looking at the same amount. However, we also have to take into account the property tax. So we're gonna be talking about both of those factors because technically either whether they come out of your check or you're paying them on a bill when it comes to food or something else, or your property taxes, something that you need to be aware of, whether it's San Diego or Escondido. And if you saw my video that I released on the cost of living in San Diego, you saw that the cost of living for San Diego is at 7.8%, where the national average is at 7.3%. And like I said, our income tax, you know, it's pretty high. It's kind of good at 9.3%. Yeah, not so great. However, then we got the national average at 4.6%. Yeah, theirs is a lot better, but hey, we got the sunshine. And sometimes you got to pay to be able to live here in San Diego. So when it comes to the income tax, yes, it is technically higher, but overall we still got the ability of being able to live in San Diego. So you got to kind of weigh your cost in comparison when it comes to the cost of living of the taxes. So let's move on to the property taxes when it comes to the area of which you're actually trying to live in. So when it comes to the property taxes, in general, your lender is going to be able to set up your property taxes at what we standardize at 1.25%. In general, though, with that 1.25%, you will also find that some homes have lower taxes anywhere between 1.02 up to 1.25% for the county of San Diego. So when you have San Diego and Escondido, you're both going to be looking at 1.25%. However, if you find a home that's in San Diego or in Escondido and has additional assessments, what is additional assessments? It means extra taxes. Melrose is what we like to call it here in San Diego. So there was nothing in existence on the bare piece of land, and then they built up the houses, the roads, the schools, and the Melrose goes back to be able to help the education and the schools in that area. So best example, my home myself. We bought our home almost 14 years ago. With the home in 14 years ago, there was nothing here. It was a bare land and there was nothing that was built up like houses or road or anything like that. It was literally land with a whole bunch of snakes and like no trees, just bare dirt. Okay, so 14 years ago, they built it all up. They built up the houses that now exist with those roads that now exist, along with the high school that's across the street. So with that, the Melrose that connects to our house goes to those areas. So for ourselves, you have the Melrose that's going to be about an additional $7,300 a year just for our area here. Flip side, you could go to Harmony Grove, which is on the other side over by Del Dios Highway of Escondido, which is also something that they do also pay additional taxes. So that is also, again, a Melrose, an assessment. Same thing to San Diego, depending on whether they built up the area, they could also pay some additional special assessments or have an association due, so HOAs. So HOA dues are basically like you have a community and the people that maintain it are like, you're paying for that maintenance of that area. It's very similar to having like HOA on a condominium, except because our houses are in a cul-de-sac, are in a community, that's why you end up paying the HOA, plus you end up paying the Melrose. So depending on what you're looking at, that could end up being more expensive than just the 1.25% that I was talking about earlier. So it's really important to, one, know what those assessments are if they apply to you. How much are your property taxes going to be? Because this can be very different. And so when we're comparing San Diego and Escondido, technically one could be higher than the other, or the other one could be higher than the other one, whether it's Escondido or San Diego, mainly because it's all about the roads. Was there anything in existence on those roads when the home was built? If not, then odds are you're going to need to pay Melrose or you're going to need to pay HOA for the maintenance of the area. Like I was talking about where we live, and then in comparison, again, Harmony Grove, there are multiple other areas that have these same special assessments that you need to be aware of. So on that note, special assessments, extra taxes. This is something that you need to be aware of when you end up moving to San Diego or anywhere else, that you have the correct amount of taxes inside of your escrow account. So why do I say this? Because many times you will find that the lender that you chose did not correctly assume the taxes that were supposed to be calculated for your house. So just as a brief example, if you go to Riverside County, to Temecula, Murrieta, Menifee, you will find taxes are more expensive. So they're not 1.25 and they're not 1.02%. And because they're not that low and they're closer to 1.7 to 2.5%, sometimes lenders do not calculate those correct percentages, and then you end up not having enough money to pay out your tax bill when they're due in November, late in December, due in March, late in April. So it's really important that you have that all calculated for a monthly budget, because they do re-annualize and re-review your escrow account as a lender every single year. So depending on whether you're going to San Diego or you're going to stay in Escondido, you want to make sure exactly how much you're paying in taxes for your house for the future. And if you're changing, let's say selling one house and you're bringing those taxes over to your next house for your, let's say, San Diego home, you want to make sure you fill out the paperwork to be able to bring over those taxes and bring over the lower tax rating, because that's really important to be able to pay lower taxes, whether you're in San Diego or in Escondido, because they will benefit in both spots. Okay, so enough about all of the cost of living. Let's talk about also technically what costs us to be able to do something here in San Diego and in Escondido. So the things to do here in San Diego and in Escondido. So One thing that I would really recommend that when you're moving here to San Diego that you look at is the Safari Park and the San Diego Zoo. Technically speaking, if you've lived here in San Diego, you will know that the Safari Park used to be called the Wild Animal Park. So they changed that a long time ago, but they connect together. What does that mean? That the San Diego Zoo and the Safari Park actually have annual passes. So when you're moving here to San Diego, you want to definitely make sure to pay for the annual passes. So why do I say that? Because technically speaking, you could, spend the money to the annual passes and then never go. I can assure you that's not going to be the case. So here's the reason why. Annual passes for the San Diego Zoo and the Wild Animal Park, technically the Safari Park, cost for the 2 passes for one household. For us, technically speaking, we always have them like a separate household. It's $277 for the Keepers Club. So how does this break down? So when it comes to like the 2 separate households, meaning that it's me and then I take my sister-in-law, or me and I take my mom, well, that allows me to take myself and one other person that does not live in my house. Of course, I can always take my husband, but if I don't want to go with my husband, I want to go with somebody else and take my girls, then they don't have to buy a ticket. So that's why I recommend the annual passes, because that program, that Keepers Club, is so lenient that you get to go whenever you want, whether it's a zoo or the Safari Park. And then let's talk about the Keepers Club when it comes to the Kids Club for the kids. So if you go to either the Wild Animal Park or the zoo, Safari Park or the zoo, either one, they're the same thing. So if you go to the zoo or the Safari Park, when you just go one day, it's going to cost you $50. However, if you buy, again, annual pass for your kids, it's going to cost you $60. $60 for one daughter, $60 for the other daughter, and then we can get to go whenever we want. So we go to the zoo, go to the Safari Park, spend a couple hours, come back home, go maybe a week later, go for another couple of hours. Best part there is that you don't even pay for parking once you have annual passes. So it's stuff like that when you're here in San Diego, whether it's going to be San Diego or it's going to be Escondido, you're definitely going to want to have the annual passes for that Safari Park plus the zoo, which is technically one pass. Remember, annual passes, Keepers Club for yourself, as well as for your kids. And of course, I think it's like the age of 3 or something like that, where technically you don't have to pay for them. But my girls, they're 9 and 7. Well, technically my 7-year-old's almost 8. So I gotta pay. So with that being said, it's still a great deal. And of course, if you don't want to stay here in San Diego and Escondido, but you want to buy here, we got Disneyland like 2 hours north. So that's always another idea to be able to do. And we have so many other spots like museums, the Center of the Arts that's in Escondido, the museums that are in San Diego, to give you additional options of things to do. And let's not forget about, the beaches that are like about 15 minutes from the 78, or if you're coming from the 15, it's going to be closer to like 30 to 40 minutes, depending on which one of the 30 beaches you go to or you take your kids to. So it's really important to be able to have some flexibility and know the cool things and the cool fun stuff you're going to do once you move, whether it's to San Diego or Escondido. Either way, the stuff that you're going to do is going to be fun and you're going to enjoy all of our sunshine. All right, amazing people. So today we were talking all about the cost of living between San Diego and Escondido. So we did technically see that the cost of living is going to cost you more money to live in San Diego versus Escondido. However, depending on where you're going to work, remember that transportation is going to depend on where you really want to live, because maybe the time that it's going to take you to be able to go to work and like the transit time, maybe it's not realistic to live in Escondido, even though the cost of living is lower. Maybe it's more realistic to live in San Diego because you're going to be closer and you won't hit as many freeways. Either way, San Diego and Escondido are both amazing spots to live in. And of course, we got a whole bunch of places to be able to go and have fun. But before you decide to make that move, if you're thinking or even possibly pondering, not so sure, you definitely need to reach out to us, because we will definitely make sure to have your back when you're ready to make that move. So if you're thinking about moving to San Diego, or maybe you're just thinking about moving from a different piece of area from San Diego to maybe to Escondido, you definitely need to give us a call, send us a text or an email, whatever is easiest for you. We got your back when moving. And let's not forget, we release videos every single week, and you got to make sure that you click that subscribe button and tap that little bell to get reminded every single time that we release them. And now hopping on your screen, you're finding out all the other amazing spots and amazing videos that we release out talking about the cost of living and the different areas in San Diego and all about the best home loans that work for you and your family. So before you watch that new video, don't forget, hit that like button. Thanks so much. Have an amazing day and see you on the next one.